My mum was looking at me like... Hello everyone! Welcome back to my channel. My name is Enola, and if you are new here, then welcome, and if you're returning, then welcome back. So I wanted to do a little video today because I haven't done a video in a while and I've made it my life's purpose to start doing these more regularly. I've had a bit of a lifestyle change and it's due to the pandemic, and I'm sure a lot of people have had a lot of lifestyle changes, but mine has meant that I'm really busy at the moment and I'm finding it really difficult to find time to do all my creative things. I just want to be putting more videos out there, so in that respect, click subscribe on my channel, give this video a thumbs up and drop a comment below if you want to chat with me, because I always like to chat to people. Let's jump straight in it today. I wanted to do a little video because we're heading down the road towards Christmas now, and this year has just gone so fast. So last month, October, the new film The Witches came out, the remake, and it was something that I knew I wanted to watch and do a little review on because it's one of my absolute childhood favourite horror movies, like family horror movies. So I've taken the time today to do this. A little bit late to the game, but I definitely wanted to get this out before it hits Christmas time. So when we're still kind of in that like post-Halloween vibe, post-bonfire vibes, and The Witches remake is relatively new still. So in that respect, let's dive straight into the video. The Witches from 1990 was definitely one of my favourite films, but as a kid I had like a really vivid imagination and this film used to absolutely terrify me. If this film did not terrify you as a child, then oh my god, you must have literally been so brave, because I would literally carry this around with me for months after I watched it for the first time. Saying that, when I was a kid I was like really strange anyway. Like I hated horror movies. If I ever watched anything that was remotely scary, I'd have nightmares for months about it. I would hallucinate. I would literally be convinced that all this stuff that I was watching was real. Nowadays, not so much. I actually love watching horror films nowadays. So anyway, I was super excited to watch the remake of The Witches, and there will be spoilers in this video. Just as a disclaimer, if you haven't watched it, don't watch this video until you've watched it. Basically, I was pleasantly surprised with the new one. I'm just going to round it up before we get into the details. I enjoyed it. I came away from it thinking, yeah, that was good. I liked it, but it wasn't mind-blowing, if that makes sense. These are just going to be my opinions. Like, this is definitely not a textbook thing. This is just literally what I think of it. I definitely thought the all-star cast were magnificent. It was wonderful. I never expected anything less when you had the likes of Octavia Spencer and Anne Hathaway and Stanley Tucci. Amazing. But there was just a few things that I was like, I wish that was in it, or oh, I wish they'd done this. Bottom line of this video, the 1990 version is still definitely my favourite, but this one did come in very close to that one. So let's get into the little details about what I liked and disliked about the new Witches. In the remake, the narrator of the film is actually a guy, and he turns out to be, spoiler alert, the young child that gets turned into a mouse. Now, in the original he's called Luke. In the new film he doesn't actually have a name. If you do know his name, drop it in the comments, because I totally would have missed this, but he always gets called like different pet names and doesn't actually get called a specific solid name. But it was the boy grown up, but he's a mouse still, and he's now narrating at the start of the movie. Whereas in the 1990 version, it's the grandma that's narrating, and I kind of like this a bit more because it automatically gives you that kind of like homely kind of feel, like grandma telling you a spooky story sort of thing. Like, I like that vibe. But I get how it's like more modern and upbeat and kind of like with the times with the remake. So moving on from that, we'll go for the setting. Now, the setting of the remake of the film is very different to the original, because in the original 1990 version of The Witches, it's set in two different places. It's set in Norway and it's also set in England, which of course is very relatable for me personally, being from England. Now, in the remake, it's set in 1968 Alabama, and it stays within the USA. I liked this. I liked that it was set in America, and I liked that it was 60s because I love the 60s vibe anyway. Cinematography, I liked the vibe, I liked the colours that they used. I also liked that the cast was very diverse. The boy and his grandma in the remake are from a black family, and I think it's great because it's very relevant for society today and things, and it's just good to see that cultural diversity, whereas in the 1991 a lot of the people, if not all of the people, are from like a white background. So I just like how they mixed it up and they had like all different cultures. Octavia Spencer did a great job of being the grandma. I think she was amazing. She's amazing literally everything that she does. In the original, of course, it starts in Norway, and it's Luke and his grandma. He's got a name, he's called Luke. and they then go to the hotel in England. So that was kind of like the difference in setting. I liked it. I liked the American 60s vibe. But then again, I like the 80s and the 90s, the high-waisted mom jeans and just like get all that vibe as well. So I think there's a lot of nostalgia that hangs around the old one, because that's why I love it, because I watched it as a child, and I think for most people that are the same age as me, you have that nostalgia attached to the old one. So I'm trying not to be too kind of like biased, but there was a lot of things that I just thought were missing in the remake, which I will touch on. So moving swiftly on, I noticed that the eerie kind of story that the grandma tells about the witches was very different in the remake. So in the original, I used to be really scared because it was like the creepy story about the girl that was captured by witches and put in a painting and like was trapped inside this painting. I used to think that was terrifying. I would always look at like pictures of like paintings that would be in my family's house and stuff and be like, I wonder if like the people in those paintings are actually trapped there. And I found it like a really creepy story in the way that they show it. It doesn't seem that scary now, but when I was younger, it definitely was like so super creepy. I was scared that I would get kidnapped. Whereas in the remake, they've done it completely different. Like that story is just wiped completely, and in its place is kind of like a humorous sort of story. It's kind of funny. So basically it's the grandma when she's young, it kind of goes back in time and they're on this kind of farm and she has a friend, and all of a sudden the friend gets distracted by the Grand High Witch. Before you know it, the Grand High Witch has turned her into a chicken. A chicken. And not just any chicken, an abnormally large chicken. I thought that was an interesting path to go down. It definitely wasn't as scary, it was probably a bit more funny that her friend had just been turned into this huge chicken. But one thing I did love about the remake was the relationship between the grandma and the boy, because in the remake the boy is actually physically in the car crash that his parents get into. Actually goes through kind of a depression in a way, like he's very sad, just like really upset about the death of his parents. And then you see this like relationship between him and his grandma really come into fruition. Like she's trying to get him to eat and she's trying to get him to dance and she's trying to like get him to see the positive side of life. She's trying to like make them have some kind of relationship and move forward. You kind of go along on that emotional journey with them. Whereas in the original, he's only sad for like a day about it really, and you don't really see that relationship in the same way that you do in the remake. So I actually really thought that was an emotional, like nice touch in the remake, so that's a big tick for me. Okay, so moving on to the actual witches themselves. Now, I'll tell you a little funny story before we move on. And that funny story is, well, it's not really funny. It's kind of like traumatizing in a way. When I was young and I watched The Witches, I must have only been about 5. I probably watched it like this the whole time because I was so terrified of anything when I was little. I hated the Grand High Witch. She freaked me out. All the witches and their eyes and the way that they looked were just like, it terrified me. And then you know like the green smoke when the witches turned into mice? For some reason I hated the green smoke. Now in the remake it's purple smoke. Purple's my favourite colour, so I was very pleased with that. And then that night my imagination went absolutely wild, and my parents had these bedside lamps that were like turquoise, and when they were turned on they would reflect like a turquoise light up the wall. A nice ambiance, you know. But me as a kid looked at these lights and I went up the stairs and I stopped dead in my tracks and was like, deadly serious, Mum, the witches are here. Like, and I was trembling and I genuinely thought that this turquoise light was the turquoise smoke from the film and that the witches had landed in my house and they were about to take me away. My mum was looking at me like... So let's talk about the actual witches themselves. Now I was disappointed by the lack of grossness in a way. Now the original, obviously the Grand High Witch is like disgusting when she removes her wig and face. Hours and hours of like obviously prosthetics and makeup and everything. Very good job for what they could do in the 90s. It was terrifying. Like, I'm sorry, but if you were a child watching that film, of course you're gonna have nightmares. Of course I was haunted for months by it. Whereas in the remake, Anne Hathaway obviously is the Grand High Witch. When I saw that it was gonna be Anne Hathaway playing the Grand High Witch, I was like, I love Anne, she's amazing, but is she gonna be scary? Is she gonna be scary? And I was like, probably not, because all I can think of when I look at Anne Hathaway for the most part is Mia from Princess Diaries. So I was actually very skeptical about how scary Anne would be. She did a really good job of being really creepy, and especially with the weird smiles that they have in the remake. It's like the smiles like split right up here. Very creepy, and yeah, I didn't like that. But even though she was amazing in the role, I don't think she was quite as scary as Angelica Houston in the original. So in the remake, they have like no toes still, but they wear like nice normal shoes, whereas in the original they wear like comfortable square shoes because they have no toes. And they still are bald and they don't have any hair, but they also kind of look a bit glam, and the Grand High Witch also looks very glam, and like they're actually kind of rocking the shaved head bald look, whereas in the original obviously they all look a bit gross. And there's a definite like differentiation between, is that a word? Differentiation between the Grand High Witch and the witches in the 1991. Like the Grand High Witch is obviously very like different to the others, but they're all still a bit gross. Whereas in the remake, they all still kind of look similar and still quite glam. Obviously, in the remake, there's a lot of CGI and different effects, and like the Grand High Witch can levitate off the floor, which I thought was good, but I feel like the use of CGI and the modernized version was that it wasn't quite as scary. Do you know what I mean? It just makes it that bit more like polished. One thing that was getting me through the movie was definitely Anne Hathaway's toe. Like, if there was one thing that was disgusting, Anne Hathaway just had this weird like toe, and it would just be like. Also, a bit of a rewind, I really wasn't as scared of the snake witch woman either. Like in the original, I used to be terrified of the woman who had the snake, and she had like really beady eyes looking up at Luke in the tree, enticing him down, and it was like proper stranger danger. Whereas in the remake, it's not quite as creepy, it's like still a bit strange, but again, it's like CGI and that special effects that make it just a bit more like cool and like whatever, but it goes into like fantasy, like rather than scary. It's just a bit more like, oh, it's a cool snake, a bit like Harry Potter sort of thing. So the mice in the film as well, in the original, Luke has 2 pet mice, and when him and Bruno are turned into mice, they can't talk to his pet mice because they're completely different. Whereas in the new one, the boy has 1 mouse, and when he gets turned into a mouse along with Bruno, they can talk to this mouse. Now, I was a bit like, meh about this, because the mouse, Mary, was supposed to be a child that was trapped in this mouse. Like, she was a previous child that had been turned into a mouse, but she was voiced by Kristen Chenoweth. As much as I love Kristen Chenoweth, she does not sound like a child. Yes, she has a high-pitched kind of squeaky voice, but she doesn't sound like a little kid. Hilarious. And if you know who Kristen Chenoweth is, you can spot her voice a mile off. So I kind of liked how it was like a bit of girl power, and she kind of joined the team, and then they were all on this mission to take down the Grand High Witch. Whereas obviously in the original, those mice became kind of irrelevant, and it was just about Bruno and Luke. But I like that bit of that little plot twist there, that she was actually a kid. All in all, like, it was really good, and it did stay quite true to the original film. I think that the newer one is a little bit truer to the book, but I haven't read the book in like years, so I can't remember properly. I think the ending is more true to the book than the 1990 version's ending. But I prefer the 1990 version's ending. Oh yeah, the hotel manager as well. I don't think anyone can beat Rowan Atkinson, because I love Rowan Atkinson, like, and he's just that proper British, like, sort of humour and whatever, whereas it was Stanley Tucci in the new one. And I love Stanley Tucci, I think he's amazing, but actually he didn't have that much of a big, it wasn't like a massive part. His character wasn't like that big really, I don't think, in my opinion. But all in all, I did enjoy it, and I think it's definitely worth a watch. It's definitely like a very modernised, family-friendly fantasy version of The Witches. I still would always prefer the 1990 version, but the new one, I think it wasn't a disappointment. I just didn't come away feeling that it was like amazing. The ending really got to me in the remake. Like, so basically, the ending of the remake, they are true to the book and they stay as mice. They've got this club kind of thing that they've like made to kind of destroy the witches sort of thing, which I kind of liked, but not as much as the 90s version, where one of the witches turns good in the end, and she's like a good witch and turns him back into a boy. I kind of liked that there was a happily ever after in the 90s one. It's always got to be a good witch. All in all, just wanted to do that quick little review today because I really did enjoy it. It was a great film. I definitely recommend watching it if you haven't watched it, because you'll still get all those like flashbacks from the 90s one. It'll definitely feel familiar, but it also has like a few like things that are just a little bit different. There is some cool stuff in there. There's like a really epic bit at the end. As far as remakes go, this was definitely one of the good ones. So yeah, thank you for watching my video today. Don't forget to give a thumbs up. Don't forget to click subscribe if you haven't already. And yeah, I'll see you again soon, guys.